Hey everybody, it is Mr. Chambers back with another read aloud. This time I wanted to talk about a book called Stamped: Racism, Antiracism, and You. So this is actually a remix of another book called Stamped from the Beginning by one of the co-authors of this book, Dr. Ibram X. Kendi. Jason Reynolds, who specifically writes books for teens and young adults, things like Ghost, Patina, Sonny, and Lou, the track series, as well as several other books. He wrote the Miles Morales book. He's got some really good ones out there. But he decided basically to rewrite this book for kids, for young adults, because not that the other book you couldn't understand, but just kind of to reframe things for a younger audience. And so I wanted to take a look at this one. There is a really great introduction by Dr. Ibram X. Kendi as well. I just wanted to read the first paragraph to everybody before I kind of dive into the first chapter. So it says, "Dear reader, to know the past is to know the present. To know the present is to know yourself. I write about the history of racism to understand racism today. I want to understand racism today to understand how it's affecting me today. I want you to understand racism today to understand how it is affecting you and America today. The book you're holding is a remix of my book, Stamped from the Beginning, a narrative history of racist and anti-racist ideas. A racist idea is any idea that suggests something is wrong or right, superior or inferior, better or worse about a racial group. An anti-racist idea is any idea that suggests that racial groups are equals. Racist and anti-racist ideas have lived in human minds for nearly 600 years. Born in Western Europe in the mid-1400s, racist ideas traveled to colonial America and have lived in the United States from its beginning. I chronicled their entire life and stamped from the beginning." And so again, this is the introduction. It's fantastic to read the entire thing, where he really just kind of talks about things that have been going on, things in this country, and kind of how we got to where we got today. But I wanted to read more focus on the Jason Reynolds section, which dives into, it starts talking about it here pretty quick, that this is not a history book, or at least not a history book that maybe you're used to. So section 1 is going to cover the years 1415 to 1728. And I know sometimes when we see dates and facts and figures in books, at least a lot of my students don't love nonfiction. While this is nonfiction, I think it's just different from most other things that people have read. So, here we go. So, chapter 1, the story of the world's first racist. Before we begin, let's get something straight. This is not a history book. I repeat, this is not a history book. At least not like the ones you're used to reading in school. The ones that feel more like a list of dates. There will be some, with an occasional war here and there, a declaration, definitely got to mention that, a constitution, that too, a court case or two, and of course the paragraph that's read during Black History Month. Harriet, Rosa, Martin. This isn't that. This isn't a history book, or at least it's not that type of history book. Instead, what this is a book that contains history, a history directly connected to our lives as we live them right this minute. This is a present book, a book about the here and now, a book that hopefully will help us better understand why we are where we are as Americans, specifically as our identity pertains to race. The R word, which for many of us still feels rated R, or can be matched only with another R word. Run. But don't. Let's all just take a deep breath, inhale, hold it, exhale, and breathe out. Race. See? Not so bad. Except for the fact that race has been a strange and persistent poison in American history, which I'm sure you already know. I'm also sure that, depending on where you are and where you've grown up, your experiences with it, or at least the moment in which you recognize it, may vary. Some may believe race isn't an issue anymore, that it's a thing of the past, old tales of bad times. Others may be certain that race is like an alligator, a dinosaur that never went extinct but instead evolved. And though hiding in a murky swamp waters, that leftover monster is still deadly. And then there are those of you that know that race, and more critical, racism, are everywhere. Those of you who see racism regularly robbing people of liberty, whether it's a violent stick-up or as a sly pickpocket. The thief known as racism is all around. This book, not history book, this present book is meant to take you on a race journey from then to now, to show why we feel how we feel, why we live how we live, and why this poison, whether recognizable or unrecognizable, whether it's a scream or a whisper, just won't go away. This isn't the be-all end-all. This isn't the whole meal. It's more like an appetizer, something in preparation for the feast to come, something to get you excited about choosing your seat, the right seat at the table. Oh, there are 3 words I want you to keep in mind. 3 words to describe the people we'll be exploring: segregationists, assimilationists, anti-racists. There are serious definitions of these things, but I'm going to give you mine. Segregationists are haters, like real haters, people who hate you for not being like them. Assimilationists are people who like you, but only with quotation marks, like you, meaning they like you because you're like them. And then there are anti-racists. They love you because you're like you. But it's important to note life can rarely be wrapped into single-word descriptions. It isn't neat and perfectly shaped. So sometimes over the course of a lifetime, and even over the course of a day, people can take on and act out ideas represented by more than one of these 3 identities. It can be both and. Just keep that in mind as we explore these folks. And actually, these aren't just the words we'll be using to describe the people in this book. They're also the words we'll be using to describe you and me. All of us. So where do we start? Might as well jump in and begin with the world's first racist. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, how could anyone know who the world's first racist was? Or you're thinking, yeah, tell us so we can find out where he lives. Well, he's dead. Been dead for 600 years, thankfully. And before I tell you about him, I have to give you a little context. Europe. That's where we are, where he was. As I'm sure you've learned by now, the Europeans, Italians, Portuguese, Spanish, Dutch, French, British, were conquering everyone. Because if there's one thing all history books do say, it's that Europeans conquered the majority of the world. The year is 1415, and Prince Henry, there's always a Prince Henry, convinced his father, King John of Portugal, to basically pull a caper and capture the main Muslim trading depot on the northeastern tip of Morocco. Why? Simple. Prince Henry was jealous. The Muslims had riches, and if Prince Henry could get the Muslims out of the way, then those riches and resources could be easily accessed. Stolen. A jack move. A robbery. Plain and simple. The take, a bountiful supply of gold. And Africans. That's right. The Portuguese were capturing Moorish people who would become prisoners of war in a war the Moors hadn't planned on fighting, but had to survive. And by prisoners, I mean property. Human property. But neither Prince Henry nor King John of Portugal was given the title world's first racist, because the truth is, capturing people wasn't an unusual thing back then. Just a fact of life. That illustrious moniker would go to a man named neither Henry nor John, but something way more awesome, who did something not awesome at all. Gomes Eanes de Zerara. Zerara, which sounds like a cheerleader chant, did just that. Cheerleaded? Cheerled? Whatever. He was a cheerleader. Kind of. Not the kind who roots for a team and pumps up a crowd, but he was a man who made sure the team he played for was represented and heralded as great. He made sure Prince Henry was looked at as a brilliant quarterback, making ingenious plays, and that every touchdown was the mark of a superior player. How did Zerara do this? Through literature. Storytelling. He wrote the story, a biography of the life and slave trading of Prince Henry. Zerara was an obedient commander in Prince Henry's military order of Christ and would eventually complete his book, which would become the first defense of African slave trading. It was called The Chronicle of the Discovery and Conquest of Guinea. In it, Zerara bragged about the Portuguese being early in bringing enslaved Africans from the Western Sahara Cape, and spoke about owning humans as if they were exclusive pairs of sneakers. Again, this was common, but he upped the brag by also explaining what made Portugal different from their European neighbors in terms of slave trading. The Portuguese now saw enslaving people as missionary work, a mission from God to help civilize and Christianize the African savages. At least that's what Zurara claimed. And the reason this was a one-up on his competitors, the Spanish and Italians, was because they were still enslaving Eastern Europeans, as in white people, not called white people back then. Zurara's ace, his trick shot, was that the Portuguese had enslaved Africans, of all shades, by the way, supposedly for the purpose of saving their wretched souls. Zurara made Prince Henry out to be some kind of youth minister, canvassing the street doing community work, when what Prince Henry really was more of a gangster, more of a shakedown man, a kidnapper getting a commission for bringing the king captives. Prince Henry's cut like a finder's fee, 185 slaves, equaling money, 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 though it was always framed as a noble cause, thanks to Zurara, who was also paid for his pen. It seems like Zurara was just a liar, right? A fiction writer. So what makes him the world's first racist? Well, Zurara was the first person to write about and defend black human ownership. And this single document began the recorded history of anti-black racist ideas. You know how the kings are always attached to where they rule, like King John of Portugal? Well, if Gomes Eanes de Zurara was the king of anything, which he wasn't, it would have been King Gomes of racism. Zurara's book, The Chronicle of the Discovery and Conquest of Guinea, was a hit. And you know what hits do? They spread. Like a pop song that everyone claims to hate, but everyone knows the words to, and then suddenly no one hates the song anymore, and instead, it becomes an anthem. Zurara's book became an anthem. A song sung all across Europe as the primary source of knowledge on unknown Africa and African peoples for the original slave traders and enslavers in Spain, Holland, France, and England. Zurara depicted Africans as savage animals that needed taming. This depiction over time would even begin to convince some African people that they were inferior, like Al-Hassan ibn Muhammad al-Wazan Afasi, a well-educated Moroccan who was out on a diplomatic journey along the Mediterranean Sea when he was captured and enslaved. He was eventually freed by Pope Leo X, who converted him to Christianity, renamed him Johann Leo. He would later be known as Leo Africanus, or Leo the African, and possibly commissioned him to write a survey of Africa. And in that survey, Africanus echoed Zurara's sentiments of Africans, his own people. He said they were hypersexual savages, making him the first known African racist. When I was growing up, we called this drinking the Kool-Aid, or selling out. Either way, Zurara's documentation of the racist ideas that Africans needed slavery in order to be fed and taught Jesus, and it was all ordained by God, began to seep in and stick to the European cultural psyche. And a few hundred years later, this idea would eventually reach America. All right, you guys, that is chapter 1 of Stamped Racism, Antiracism, and You by Jason Reynolds and Dr. Ibram X. Kendi. And there's a lot more to this book, and I know for a lot of people, race is a difficult topic to talk about. But I think it's an important topic to talk about, no matter who you are. I think just starting those conversations and not shying away from something because of that racial component or because it makes you uncomfortable. I don't know. I just think it's important to talk about, So I think we got to keep having those conversations, especially after everything that's happened. I mean, honestly, for the longest time, but for the last year specifically. So, and another reason that I wanted to talk about this book is that coming up in March, there's going to be an event called the North Texas Teen Book Festival. Some of you may have had the opportunity to go in the past to the actual in-person festival, but this year, due to COVID and everything going on, it was not safe to have thousands of people gather in a convention center and fly authors in from all across the country and the world. So they are hosting the festival live online this year through like YouTube Live and Zoom meetings and stuff like that. And Jason Reynolds and Dr. Ibram X. Kendi are going to be talking about this book, Stamped, in a live keynote that we're going to be showing at school. So if you're interested, there will be some more information coming out about that. But in the meantime, I hope you check this book out. I hope you have a chance to read it before you get to hear these two really awesome human beings kind of talk about it and do the justice that I probably can't do reading it myself. So it is available on Sora. It is available in our beautiful Northridge Library as well. So y'all, that is going to do it for this Read Aloud today. Again, I'm Mr. Chambers. If you have any questions, if you want to come talk to me about this book or anything kind of along these lines, you let me know. Thanks, guys.